Hello! If you own luxury property in Spain as a UK or a US buyer or in general a non-resident buyer, or if you've been thinking about buying that luxury villa on the Costa Blanca, but Spanish property taxes have been holding you back, I have some massive news for you today. This is arguably one of the most strategically significant tax developments for non-resident luxury property owners and in general all property owners we've seen in years. We are talking about a landmark win in the Spanish Supreme Court that directly affects international buyers and investors like you. The core of this ruling is very simple: anti-discrimination. The Supreme Court has declared that you cannot be treated differently under Spain's wealth tax law just because you live outside of Spain. For years, there has been a major discrepancy, some would call it discrimination, I do, between how residents and non-residents are taxed on their wealth. If you are a UK buyer investing in Spanish real estate, a US investor, or from anywhere outside of Spain, you've likely been paying significantly more than your fair share. But that ends now. In this video, I am breaking down exactly what this new ruling means for luxury real estate Spain owners, explaining the wealth tax in simple terms, and most importantly, answering the big question: how much have non-resident buyers been overpaying and how can you get that money back? We are digging into the details from this recent Supreme Court decision, so stick around because this could save or refund you thousands of euros on your Spanish property investment. First of all, let's get on the same page. What is the Spanish wealth tax for non-residents? Spain is one of the few countries in Europe that still applies a wealth tax or impuesto sobre el patrimonio, at least for now. Unlike income tax in Spain, this is a tax on what you own, not what you earn, what you own. We are talking about real estate investments, bank accounts, luxury assets, your net worldwide assets, if you live in Spain. But for non-residents buying property in Spain, and this is the key for many of you watching, you are only taxed on your assets located in Spain. Usually, this means your luxury villa or investment property or penthouse luxury property in Spain. Here are the critical basics for understanding the Supreme Court's decision. How is this tax calculated for property owners? First, there is an allowance, an amount below which the tax doesn't apply. Generally, it's 700,000 euros nationwide. However, some autonomous regions offer higher allowance for residents. Then there is an exemption. Residents get an extra 300,000 allowance for their main home. Non-residents typically don't qualify because the Spanish property isn't their primary residence. The rate. If your Spanish real estate assets exceed the allowance, you pay a progressive tax on the excess, ranging from roughly 0.2% up to 3.5%, or 2.75% highest rate in Catalonia. Now, pay attention. Critical for Costa del Sol luxury property owners and buyers. Andalusia, Costa del Sol, offers 100% discount on the tax for everyone, both residents and non-residents, meaning effectively zero wealth tax on the Costa del Sol properties. So we see which region wants to attract wealthy foreigners. If you are investing in luxury real estate on the Costa del Sol, you are not paying the wealth tax. Another region that doesn't apply the wealth tax, that discounts it 100%, is Madrid. Madrid, because Sanchez, the Prime Minister, who is the one establishing all these taxes, decides that Madrid, where he lives, is where the tax is not applied, coincidentally. Anyway, historically, this tax created major friction for international property investors. Let's say you buy a 3 million luxury villa on the Costa Blanca, and suddenly you are hit with an annual bill just for owning it. But for residents, there is also a safety net, a shield. And this is where the controversy begins. Let's talk about this tax shield, or límite conjunto in Spanish. The mechanism that is at the center of the Supreme Court battle, and it's crucial for understanding Spain property taxes for UK buyers, US buyers, non-resident buyers. Spanish law, Constitution, recognizes that taxes must not be confiscatory. You shouldn't have to sell your property just to pay taxes on it. So, for residents, in addition to the allowance and the additional 300,000 euros of allowance, there is a rule. Your combined total of your wealth tax plus your personal income tax cannot exceed 60% of your total taxable income. If it exceeds 60%, the wealth tax gets reduced sometimes by up to 80%. Here's a simplified example. Imagine you are a wealthy resident owning millions in Spanish real estate, but your annual income is low. Maybe you are retired or you had a slow business year. If you owe 50,000 euros in wealth tax, but your income was only 40,000 euros, the law steps in and says you cannot pay more tax than you earn. The government reduces your wealth tax bill potentially by up to 80%. This is huge protection. It caps your liability based on your ability to pay. But here was the problem for non-resident buyers. Until this ruling, Spanish tax authorities said this shield only applies to residents. If you were a non-resident from the UK, the US, or anywhere else, you were denied this shield. It didn't matter if your income was zero, you had to pay the full uncapped wealth tax. This created massive inequality, especially for non-resident buyers investing heavily in Spanish luxury property. So this brings us to the court's landmark decision for international real estate investors. The Spanish Supreme Court ruled that this exclusion was illegal. Denying non-resident the tax shield violates EU principles regarding free movement of capital. The court held that residents and non-residents are in comparable positions regarding the wealth tax, since it is applied on ownership of Spanish assets in both cases. What this means for you? Non-residents must now be treated the same as residents. You are entitled to apply that same 60% cap. If you have high luxury properties value in Spain, like a Costa Blanca villa, for example, but generate very little taxable income, your wealth tax bill shouldn't be the full amount. It should be capped. Now, I want to specifically address the question regarding non-resident buyers. Our friends from the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, wherever. How much did you have to pay compared to what you should have paid when buying and owning a luxury Spanish property? Here is the scenario, or what you had to pay. Let's say you owned a property investment Spain portfolio worth 4 million. After your 700,000 euro allowance, you have 3.3 million euro taxable. Without the shield, your wealth tax bill could easily be around 50,000 to 60,000 euros per year, depending on the exact region and year. You had to pay that full amount, period. Now, let's look at the shields scenario. If you have a low taxable income, for example, because you are retired, which is usual, the 60% limit would kick in. Ideally, your tax would be capped at 60% of that low income. Now, note, there is a floor. So you usually still have to pay a minimum of 20% of the original tax calculation. That's why they say that the tax could be reduced by up to 80%, because there is a minimum floor of 20% that you have to pay. But even with that floor, that 60,000 euros bill could legally be reduced to roughly 12,000 euros. That's a big difference, including for very wealthy owners. Why should you gift this money to Sanchez? This means that non-resident buyers were effectively overpaying by 40,000 to 50,000 euros every single year, simply because they lived outside of Spain. That is the scale of the penalty you were paying on your Spain property taxes. So, what do you do now as a UK or US or any non-resident property owner of a luxury property in Spain? This ruling isn't just about the future, it's about the past too. And you can recover your money. Spain has a 4-year statute of limitations. If you paid the wealth tax in the last 4 years and were denied the shield reduction, you may be entitled to a refund of the overpaid Spanish property taxes, plus interest. So, what should you do? First, check your filings. Did you pay the wealth tax? It's called Impuesto sobre el Patrimonio. Calculate the cap. Look at your taxable income for those years. If your wealth tax was high compared to income, you are likely due money back. Get professional help. This is a Supreme Court ruling, but the tax office won't automatically send you a check. You must claim it. I am not a tax advisor. I'm sharing this news, but I strongly recommend consulting a specialist for your specific situation. This ruling restores fairness and makes Spain a much more competitive destination for international luxury property investment again. And be careful, this is very, very important. One last observation that must not go unnoticed. The Supreme Court decision sets a clear legal precedent on anti-discrimination in Spanish tax law. Remember this every time you see articles about the infamous 100% purchase tax for non-EU residents described as something already in place. It is not, and it cannot be. As I explain in my dedicated videos, I put the links in the description, it cannot happen legally in those terms. If the application of this existing established wealth tax has been deemed discriminatory by the highest court in Spain, how would a brand new punitive 100% purchase tax only on non-EU buyers be perceived by that same Supreme Court under the same Spanish Constitution and the same European laws? The answer is clear. As usual, listen to trustworthy people and do your own research. If you found this video helpful, please like it, subscribe, hit the notification button. I will keep bringing you insights, news, property opportunities, investment opportunities, and market news on Spanish real estate. I will leave a link in the description about an article that describes this court decision, and you can read it to get all the details yourself. Don't let the taxman keep what's legally yours. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.